first podcast episode of 2023 here on the Drive and Dish NBA. I think, did we start the podcast like in general in 2013 or 2014? Because we're coming up on 10 years.
We are coming up on 10 years really quick. As much as I want this to be our 10th year, it is not our 10th
one
year.
off. Okay.
No, it was 2014 confirmed. It was right after the All-Star break.
Right.
And then because we started right around the trade deadline. I believe it was in February was when, like around February is when we started like recording those first couple of episodes. And then I feel like at the end of the month is when the first one like actually went published. And then because the first finals we covered was the last Heat Spurs series, the second one, when the Spurs got revenge in 2014. So this is our 10th season, technically. Well, no, technically, this is our 10th season, but as much as I want this to be our 10 year, and I feel like I don't know what we got to do, but I feel like when we hit 10, we got to do something crazy. But
sure.
No, it is not. 2013 though is like for me at least. And one for you, because you're the same age as me. So, like, we graduated college this year, 10 years ago. For me, I moved to Jacksonville. You had been down there a little longer because you went to Flagler and St. Augustine. But for me, August 2013 is when I moved to Jacksonville and started that whole Florida adventure. So,
crazy.
Crazy. That's 10 years ago, man. It really does, like, you know, not to be all cliche, but like, it definitely flew. Like, it was crazy. And if it feels like a long time ago for sure. I gotta be honest though, it doesn't feel like 10 years ago.
No, it feels a lot shorter than that. Like I was telling you, this episode's gonna drop before the episode I'm about to talk about comes out. But I was on a podcast that's like all about radio people, and they asked me to come on and talk about like my journey and ideas that I have for the radio industry and all that stuff. And reflecting on it all, it was like, man, oh man, I remember thinking like, is this the bad days, like the times where we're grinding out these radio days? I was like, man, is this ever gonna end? And now I look back at it, I was like, man, that was pretty quick. Like that wasn't that bad. And so it is crazy to go back and think about that. And
I mean, it's the like the mix of it, right? Like I like there were for sure, like we don't need to sugarcoat it either and lie to anybody. We were broke and making like virtually no money at the time.
Yeah.
I was working initially these overnight midnight shifts. I mean, when we started the podcast, I was working midnight to 9 in the morning, and then my improvement was working 10 or 2 a.m. to 10:30. And like legitimately that was a change my life improvement when I worked in Jacksonville. It's definitely crazy, but I mean, that's the thing though. I mean, that's what kind of with this podcast has been cool is like y'all got to grow up with us a little bit. Like we are in our 30s now. A lot of life events have happened, including with you. We're talking about your Radio Inc. podcast first, which I'm going to tweet and that everyone should go listen to for sure. But I don't got a who's balling, who's falling for you this week because we may not do it this episode. Spoiler alert for what else is coming up. But Justin has his own big news. Congratulations to you and your wife, Nicole. Soon to be parents of baby Princess Kuzart coming up. I mean, Princess isn't her name, but she's gonna be a girl. So
we're
little princess coming in May.
Yeah, coming in at the end of the May, future WNBA star. Although if we're being completely honest, probably more likely golf star, because Nicole's family is so into golf. Her dad, by the way, literally has like a 4-step system to get his grandkids like excited about golf, and it's worked on 2 of them already, where like at their house he lives in a like a pretty close to a golf course. So he has a golf cart that he drives to the golf course. He plays like 3 or 4 times a week. And with the kids, like when they're growing up, they're so young that they just get excited to go on the golf cart ride to the golf course. So he gets them like extra pumped about the golf cart ride, right? Like, let's go. And now when they go to the grandpa's house, they're pumped about going on this damn golf cart. And then like after a while, the golf cart stops at the clubhouse, and they go in the clubhouse and they get some French fries at the restaurant. And then, once they get a little bit older and they realize like French fries are on that, it's like, oh, the golf cart stops at the putting green first, and we play on the putting green, and then we go get French fries. And then once they're older than understanding the putting green, it's like, oh, now we stop at the driving range and the putting green, and then we get French fries. And it's worked on 2 kids. I'm like, he's going to implement this system with my daughter when she's born. And get her in, get her in and excited about golf. So I'm sure that is down the line. And with Nicole working at TPC, like that kid's gonna be around so much golf.
Well,
Like,
it's crazy. I was about to gas you up and tell you that you had a pretty good shot of like, or you have a better chance than you're giving yourself credit for of creating a WNBA player. Cause like, Just, you're a good athlete, like for sure. Like you're good at bat. You're by far always between Tim and I when we were always doing this podcast. Like you are the best at actual basketball. I think there is no objectively denying that. Like you said, your wife golfed in college. Like she's really good at it though. And now I think about like, yeah, it's for sure going to swing golf. But I mean, golf is great because the one thing about golf is besides the fact that you can make a ton of money if you're really good at it, you're just always playing somewhere with great weather. You know, you're in
yeah,
Florida, you're in Arizona,
down
you're
here,
in
there's
Hawaii,
well,
you're in
not
the
even
UK
that.
when
Like,
it's the great time of year. Like you're not golfing in, you know, you're not in 6 feet of snow or anything
right.
like that.
And not even that, it's like we're already down here, so from a being able to play golf year round, that is also a thing. And Nicole's, cousin, her cousin's husband trains, like, Billy Horschel, like, big name golfers, like, he trains them. So, like, I was joking with him, like, you gonna train my, daughter when she's born?" He's like, "I'll give you my rates." And I was like, "Ooh,
I'll give
how
you my
about
damn,
how
bro.
about"
I know he's a high demand, but gee, he even give you like he even give you an entertaining like lead you on for a
Well,
little bit.
he was like, "You know, your wife also knows how to play golf." I'm like, "Right, but you train the pros, so, like, let's double down here." And he's like, "Yeah, I'll give you my rates." And then I was like, "Ooh, if there's not a family discount, don't send it.
Yeah,
Don't even I'm not worried about it." Because, like, listen, at this point, like, we're you know,
like, bro, just tell me no at that rate.
well, there's a bunch of people that listen to this podcast that know I do another podcast with a coworker of mine, Tank, and we both now have
You
daughters.
could just shout out the newbie brothers, bro. You don't have to beat around
Well,
the bush.
the reason I didn't call it that is because it's going through a bit of a transformation, right? Like the Newbie Brothers was all about video games.
Right.
And I'm still all about video games, but I have a feeling once my daughter is born, I'm not going to be able to play it as much as I would prefer. So we were talking like maybe the Newbie Brothers transitions to like two girl dads type podcast where we talk about shit we don't understand or something. You know what I mean? Like, because there's gonna be a lot of that. I'm already noticing that. Like these little girl clothes that are coming in, which you would hate because one was a Rangers tutu thing. This kid's gonna be so sported out. There's so
Oh,
many
that's
Dolph
fine. Just that rate. Ugh,
yeah, Rangers tutu. We got like
gross.
4 or 5 Dolphins onesies that got these little poof things on the
The Dolphins are
shoulders.
fine. I got no beef with the Dolphins. We only with Eagles never played the Dolphins. They're fine by me.
Nicole made my dad promise because my dad and her dad were joking because obviously my dad's Eagles fan and Jim is a Dolphins fan. So they were like, "Oh, which one's the kid's gonna be a fan of?" And I was like, "Joke's on you, it's gonna be a Jags fan." So like, so um they were both joking that like they were going to buy a bunch of sports stuff for the kid to wear so they can subliminally convince the kid to be a fan of their team. And Nicole made my dad promise the only thing she or he cannot buy her is Flyers gear. That is the
Wow,
only one.
wow,
That is the
Nicole.
only one she said no
Whoa,
to.
whoa,
Yeah.
whoa. Wait,
And
that was unnecessary.
I
What,
said,
can I
so
throw a
you
flag on the play? What's going on, Justin?
I said, "Dad," she said, no clothing. Just buy her a gritty doll." And
Right, that's what I'm saying. Exactly. Get her a little gritty hat with the
Nicole's
eyes and
like
everything.
Nicole's like, "That actually might give her nightmares if you buy her that thing."
I
So,
low key got a gritty hat for Christmas that I might wear on the podcast next
ooh.
time. It is outrageous.
I was watching the Flyers game the other night. Nicole's like, "You never watch the Flyers." I'm like, "Well, now because I know you don't want our daughter to be a fan
Right
of
now, I'm
this."
spiting you. Yeah,
But I watched
disrespecting the brand.
and I forget who it was against,
Bro,
but
the
they
Flyers
dropped
stink. We already have
no,
enough problems. We don't need to
but
rub it
dude,
in.
but dude, the Flyers went off that game. They scored like 4 goals in a matter of like
Oh, against Arizona the other
yeah,
on Monday. Yeah.
it's like
Apparently they need to go to the West Coast. They've never in franchise history swept the West Coast trip. This
it's
Flyers
crazy.
team, which is maybe the worst I've ever seen in my lifetime, apparently swept the West Coast trip.
It was crazy. Like that game was so wild. I've never seen so many scoring goals like in a matter of seconds, back to back to back. I was just like, whoa. And Nicole's like, this would happen when you watch. Now you're gonna watch this damn team all the time. I was like, well, if they're gonna score 7, if they're gonna score a touchdown every game, So that was what it is. But we got way off topic. Another thing that we were going to start this podcast off before we ranted for 10 minutes was the fact that we were going to reflect on 2022 in the NBA and some crazy stat lines that happened in 2022, because there were some wild ones. Uh, the history books ones, NBA.com, by the way, put out this article of these stat lines if you want to check them out. We're going to skip over a few, and it's not because we're going to slight them, but it's just because those specific stat lines are going to fall into what we're going to talk about at the end of the episode. So, like Luka's 60, 20, 10 assist, triple double, like that's going to come up at the end of the episode. So, it is on here. We're just not going to talk about it because we don't want to hit it twice. But that was one of the stats that came up in the quote unquote history books stat line of the year. Another one, it's going to come off like we're real homers, is Joel Embiid, all the way back November 13th of 2022, when he dropped 59 points, 11 rebounds, 8 assists, 7 blocks, and 1 steal. And that was against Utah.
Yeah, it's just crazy how 40 in general has become, because I mean, Embiid had back-to-back 40s last week. He had 54 and a loss the other week. Like, this year in particular, I mean, we're seeing the highest offensive output across the board since 1985, which is wild because that's an era that I think most of us associate with defense and not as much three-point shooting. But I mean, I don't know, because guys are playing defense. Like, that's the thing, is I know that it's a little bit of regular season right now, but like, I don't think the entire NBA has just taken playing defense off either. Like, these really are just these massive historic individual efforts. I mean, Giannis had 40 for a week straight. We're going to get into Donovan Mitchell's 71 later, but quite literally one of the greatest, if not the greatest, regular season scoring performance I've ever seen in my lifetime. You mentioned Luka. Lauri Markkanen had 49 the other night.
And shout out to him, by the way.
Tatum's
He's
had
on the
50. Like,
shout out to Markkanen, got on the All-Star list, All-Star game list for the fan votes, which we are also going to talk about at the end of the episode a little bit here.
I'll put it this way. Like, I watched Sixers Bulls last night. We're recording this on January 7th. Zach LaVine was like 12 of 14 from behind the arc and had 43 points. Absolutely torched the Sixers. And it didn't even like rank as like the best, anywhere near the best stat line of the week. Like, offense really just is at a premium. Klay Thompson had 54 the other night. Like, these are just games that are randomly popping up, and they're in, obviously in my notes and such. But the fact that has become routine. Like, it feels like 40 is the new 30 in the NBA. We're getting one of these every night. I mean, the fact that because I think the Klay Thompson game was the same night as Donovan Mitchell. Like, the fact that somebody had 50 points and didn't have the highest offensive scoring output of the night, like, that's just a wild thing to think about.
And what's funny is, and not like, it almost contradicts exactly that, but it was like NBA Stats and News or something like that to put this out. The Suns and Cavs the other night combined for a total of 29 points in the first quarter, which was the lowest scoring quarter in the NBA this season.
Yeah.
And then it was followed up 40 minutes later by the Bucks and Raptors, who put a combined 25 points in the first quarter. It's like, well, everyone scored themselves out by hitting these crazy numbers. Another one under the quote historic category was Jokic becoming the first player to ever record 45, 10, 10, and 3 steals and 3 blocks. That was March 6th over New Orleans. It was an overtime win, and he had 46, 12 rebounds, 11 assists, 3 steals, and 4 blocks, which
Jokic
is
has
another
two
crazy
40-point triple-doubles this year. He had 41, 15, and 15 against Phoenix, and he had 40, 27, and 10 against Charlotte. That hadn't been done since Wilt. I mean, and Wilt is the ultimate, like, these are just the most outrageous, unheard of, can't believe they realistic happened or ever happened stats that we see in the NBA by far. It really is. Like, this is just, and I mean, a part of me is it goes both ways. Like, I do think guys are just good now. Like, I don't even, again, I think guys are playing defense. I don't think this is just a regular season inflation. I really think that the top talent in the NBA just is this good. And there is so much of it. Like, this is what we've been saying for years on this podcast now, right? Like, the NBA has so much more talent across the board, league wide. There is somebody worth watching or somebody that could go off like this on every team on any given night, except for maybe Detroit right now because they're all hurt.
Yeah.
Like, it's just it really is like the league's in a great place in that regard, in the sense that, yeah, it's very like the NBA has a ton of superstars. They're all extremely marketable, and they all just do outrageous stuff like this that we are in a way where we do kind of take some of it for granted. Like, I mean, I just like I'm still looking at Jokic just because we had him up recently, but like that man had 2 40-point triple doubles this season. That
And
is
it's so weird
ridiculous.
and it's so weird to me, and I know this is just an observation thing, like, he doesn't look like the stereotypical basketball guy that would do that to you.
Well, but I mean, that's always the thing, or I think what it's been a lot of the way with Steph, right? Like
Yeah.
Steph Curry looks like a guy you'd run into at the YMCA and then will absolutely cook you on the grandest stage.
Mhm.
Even Luca to an extent. Like Luca doesn't look. I mean, he's in shape a lot more this season, but I mean, Luca's never looked like that supreme athlete, where somebody like LeBron, for example, like LeBron's a transformer,
Yeah, like, you
basically.
see
Like you
LeBron,
know
you
what it
know
is
yeah,
there.
you know LeBron's
You know,
LeBron, like, you
yeah,
know he's a monster.
Giannis once he got
Yeah,
on an NBA workout program,
yeah.
it's like, yeah, no, that dude is a freak for real.
So, I did wanna bring this up, another thing that they talked about, obviously, Luka's 60-point game, which we've already alluded to, we're gonna talk about later. The other 2 60-point games that came last year in 2022 was Cat, when he dropped 60, 17, 3 assists, 1 steal, and I believe he was the first player with, 60 points and 17 boards in a game since Shaq did it in 2000. The other one would be Kyrie Irving, which was March 15th of 2022. It almost makes I almost want to pin them up against each other and see like whose was more impressive because while you have Cat being the first player to do that since Shaq, you have Kyrie who did 66 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 steals, a block, and he did it in the fifth fewest minutes in a 60-point game since 1983 and 1984 season. Like both are so impressive, but like which one's more impressive, you know?
We're pulling hairs, I think. I'm
Right.
skewed to Kyrie just because I think rebounds are probably the easiest counting stat to get in the NBA, especially when you're 7
And
feet tall.
and I think
Um,
another I guess another kind of category that would help you on that one is I believe Kyrie in that one had 41 in the first half. So like
the lack of
that
minutes too is really telling because
yeah,
it's just like, well, what would you have done if you played the whole game? Like
right.
that was always one of my bigger what ifs, and I feel like I brought this up on the podcast. I guess it's been 10 seasons, so maybe at some point. But I remember Carmelo Anthony with the Knicks back in the day. I think this was in 2013 or maybe early 2014, where he had 70 in like three
Oof.
quarters, pretty much. Like he was it's to the point where I was like, oh my god, he could maybe break 100. Like it was the first time, I mean, I guess since Kobe, but even Kobe with 81, like Kobe got to 80 real late. Like, I don't think there was anyone who thought that he would get to 100. And that's still like, I mean, that to me is the most impressive regular season game I've ever seen. Um, because I was doing that. You start to have these reflections when you have all these lines, right? About which one is the best. And Kobe with 81 has to be, in my opinion. Um, I'll tell you what, man, Donovan and Luca got close. Like that Donovan 71 was because I'll keep saving it, but they needed all of it. Like they
I
needed
know.
every one of those shots down to the putback off the free throw that even forced overtime.
Yeah, and that one that's the big thing about, like, I've noticed that is that I feel like we'd probably have to go look at the stat, but I feel like there's been an abnormal amount of, like, overtime games in the past, like, 3-ish weeks. Like, there's
Yeah.
been so many overtime
Well,
games, it feels like.
Just so I'll put you on the spot a little bit here because we're not just kind of going off a little bit, but with Jokic having this, obviously he's the back-to-back MVP. With Giannis having the week that he just had, with Joel having carried for large
Yeah.
portions of times, with Luca just doing this every night, like Donovan Mitchell, I think with how Cleveland has played, obviously has played himself into that conversation as well. I guess where is your head at with MVP right now?
I feel like probably is still Jokic, but and that's because they're I mean, they're number 1 in the West right now. Um 8-2 in their last 10. Jokic, obviously a big part of that. Part of me also would say that there's most likely um, like a voter fatigue we talk about all the
Yeah.
time.
I don't think they're
So
giving Jokic 3 straight, even if he
that's what I
deserves it,
mean.
which is crazy that he might deserve it 3 years straight.
So like part of me wants to say Embiid,
Oh, you're
because
still going big. Wow.
yeah, I think I'm still going big. I think I'm
I
still
think
going big. I mean, Embiid's second, second in the league right now behind Luka for points per game, 33.5, which is up from last year. So like I get that you're gonna have the the if you're debating Luka and Embiid specifically, you're gonna say Embiid has better players around him. But a lot of it's been through injury, so those guys haven't necessarily been there either, you know?
Yeah, I think Giannis is charging.
I
His
agree.
usage rate has also been really high.
I agree.
Chris Middleton's been out of the lineup for most of the season, obviously coming back now. I mean, Tatum is Boston cooled off a little bit. They've come back to earth. They're still number one in the Eastern Conference right now, so cooled off is very relative. But I think Tatum is there. It feels like Luka to me has the
Yeah.
momentum, I guess, if I were asking who the prediction would be. But yeah, I mean, the fact that Jokic, like, he really does have an incredible case for it. But I'm with you. I think voter fatigue will definitely kick in. I don't think they're going to give Jokic 3 in a row. Because
If
3 in a
you
row, I
had
mean,
to
like MJ never got 3 in a row. Kareem never got 3. Like, nobody wins 3 MVPs in a row. Like, that's kind of wild. So, and I think that's where people struggle with it. It's like, how can we? Because like, even though Jokic is an all-time great already, and that's where it's tough. It's like
if
how
you
do you
had
balance
to
that?
if you had to guess right now for the entirety of 2022-2023 season, which is what, like, somewhere around, like, 37 games played, I think, for some teams right now. Um,
Yeah,
how many
about 39 roughly.
30 yeah. How many players do you think are averaging over 30 points per game
Oh
right
my
now?
god, it's oh man, I feel like it's gotta be at least 6 or 7, right?
Which one's your guess?
Oh my god, I'm going 7 then.
You got it on the nose.
Wow, okay,
Yeah.
alright.
Steph
Look at your boy. I promise I'm not cheating either.
Steph and KD are both, like, evenly at 30.0 points per game. Tatum's at 30.7, Giannis 32, Embiid 33, Luka 34 leading the league, and, Shy from, OKC at 30.
Yeah,
So,
he
like
that that's what's crazy. Gilgeous Alexander's had such an incredible season that we haven't even mentioned him to this point, but he is put up an unbelievable. I mean, OKC's chugging or surging up the standings a little bit too. They're up to 17. Like they're a
mhm.
long way from being at the bottom now. We're I mean,
4th,
Charlotte, Detroit have 11. Houston's got
he's
10. Like it's a big difference between 17. And he's been the biggest reason why by far.
he is quite literally 4th in the league for total points this season. Um, Kevin Durant, Tatum, Luka only higher than him, which is wild. You
Well,
know, because
Durant, yeah.
you look at the teams that are in the top, let's say top 6. You have Dallas, Brooklyn, Boston. As a player that has the highest point totals this season in the league, you have Luka with Dallas, Kevin Durant with Brooklyn, Jason Tatum with Boston. Then you got OKC, which is like, whoa, wait. We have these top teams, and then it's like OKC, and I know Dallas isn't necessarily the top. Um, and then you got Giannis right after that. So it's like, you know, which one doesn't belong, or which one is definitely different than the others. You know,
I think they all belong. That's what's
I
crazy. If
agree.
we're
I
talking
agree.
individual, I do think they all belong.
I
And
agree.
we didn't even talk about Kevin Durant in the MVP conversation. And obviously, I think a lot of that is because Brooklyn started rocky, but Brooklyn ain't so rocky right now, which
No.
we'll get into in a
But
little bit.
when you look at those teams, you look at Dallas, who's 4th in the league. You look at all the other teams. Then it's like OKC, who's got 17 wins and is in 13th place in the West. Like, huh? Like way lower than the rest. So
Well, and I think that's why realistically he wouldn't get MVP votes. Like as
right,
great as he's playing and as high as his value is, like there is something to be said when other teams are at the top of the conference and are playing for potential titles right now. Like that,
right.
with the winning part does have to factor in as well a little bit.
I agree. I agree.
Welcome everybody to the Driving Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Joining me as always, my co-host Justin Kuzart.
Highlight culture absolutely killing the game of basketball.
I mean, I agree with whoever. This feels like something Clay would say, but I don't think Clay tweets. Um, so let's see. I'll go with somebody on his team then. How about Jordan Poole?
No, Kyle Kuzma.
Okay. Was there any
Which
context to this, or he just randomly put that out there?
No, he just randomly put it out there, but I did see somebody talking about this a little bit, like alluding to it in a way of highlights of games that are posted on like NBA Reddit that maybe the announcers' voices are removed or whatever it is. And it's just like that specific highlight. And they were talking about how it doesn't give full context to the play and stuff like that. So maybe that's what Kyle was um alluding to as well.
Well, yeah, if you watch a highlight reel, yeah, context matters. Like, and the
Right.
highlight reel doesn't necessarily like anybody can edit a highlight reel to get look like the greatest player of all time. You know what I mean?
It's like stats in a way. Like if I want to make an argument about said player or said team, you can always go find stats that back up your argument, which is why I think like sports talk radio, sports talk podcasts in general do so well, is because you can always kind of back up your take unless it's a real bad one. Then you just kind of have to grasp at straws. But like you can still, for the most part, defend yourself with your argument that you were making.
Well, like you said, this NBA, it all really is so subjective too, a lot of times. Because I mean, this is, talk about the parity in the league.
Yeah.
I have no idea who's going to win the finals right now. It really does feel wide open. I mean, for the first quarter of the season, it sure felt like Boston was the shoe-in favorite. And I still think, again, I think Boston is a favorite right there. Like, I think they have a strong case and probably would be my number one pick to come out of the Eastern Conference at this point. But you realistically got, I mean, I think you could probably go as high as 8 or 9 teams that you can make a title case for, which is obscenely high compared to other years. I mean, think of all those Cavs Warriors years where it was like, yeah, there's 2 teams that are going to win the finals this year. Like, we don't need to overthink. Maybe 3 if you wanted to put Houston in that mix when they had Harden and Chris Paul, but it's pretty wide open this year, I'd say at this point.
Who are your if you were gonna pick 6 total, who are your 6?
If I'm picking 6,
Only 6.
Boston, Milwaukee. Man, I don't know if I
Nets?
want to go 3 from the East. I mean, I guess if I'm going to go 3 from the East, then it's Brooklyn.
Okay,
Um, and then my 3 from the West, I've still got Golden State there.
okay,
I've got Memphis there. And I've got Denver. You know how I
okay,
feel about
okay.
Denver. Like Denver's, but like the West is a lot closer. Like New Orleans, I
Yeah.
think is right there. I think Dallas is right there. I think if the Clippers ever figure out what's going on, they're right there. You could argue Phoenix is there if they survive their injuries. And we'll get into some of these teams a little bit later with the New Year's resolutions. But um, the East, if there's one you're leaving out, it's Cleveland. As much as I want Philly to be there, I just don't think they are right now.
Yeah.
Um, and then everybody below that. I mean, the biggest surprise in the East has been Miami, if anything, to me in a different direction. And Miami's been playing better recently. They're 6-4 in their last 10. Tyler Hero's really come on the last few weeks, but yeah, I mean, they're in playing position right now. I would categorize that for sure as a disappointment.
Yeah. I agree with you. I was just curious if you had to knock it down to essentially 3 from each side, who are you rolling with? Which I
Brooklyn's surging fast, man.
Yeah.
Like Brooklyn's underlying numbers are really good. And I mean, granted, it's been the last month and a half, but like Katie looks like the best mid-range shooter of all time right now. Kyrie's playing phenomenal. The role players are back and healthy. A little like Joe Harris
Mhm.
is rounding into shape. Seth Curry is healthy. Obviously, Nick Claxton has been playing excellent defense as well. But again, we'll get into a little bit more Nets when we talk some New Year's resolution and coming up here in a little bit. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. I'll read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, Amazon Music, Stitcher, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us.
And we have a YouTube that we do a video version of this podcast on. So if you would like to check that out, you can head to Drive and Dish NBA Podcast. You can be a subscriber number 56.
Yeah, 56 still kind of a random number, but hey,
Mhm.
nothing wrong with that. Get that
Mhm.
random number for sure. And now, where's more sponsors?
So let's start because we were just talking about them. The Brooklyn Nets. We are going to do our New Year's resolutions. I picked 3 teams. You picked 3 teams, and we're just going to kind of give our overall idea of what we think they could do. I had 2 specific resolutions for the Nets. First
Okay.
one is keep quiet, continue doing what you're doing, just don't get in the news for some BS, because we saw that happen a lot last year, and I think that just adds distractions. That one's more of just a one-off. The other one I was looking at is maybe potentially adding yourself another big man, because at the end of the day, if you're Brooklyn going through the playoffs, you're most likely going to have to go through someone like Giannis or maybe Embiid So having a big guy down there that can kind of, bang down low and get in the way can help. Now I know everybody's talking about Nick Claxton and how he's been developing greatly. I believe he's second in the league right now for blocks per game. Um, but if you look at Brooklyn, they ranked real low in rebound percentage. They also, but like we said, lead the league in blocks per game. But they are worse in the league for offensive rebound percentage. They are bottom three for opponent effective field goal. They are 26th in the league for opponent offensive rebound. So maybe adding another guy down low that can help Nick Claxton and can kind of get in the way and maybe alter a few more shots, that might be able to benefit. Now, I don't know if that's through trading with someone. I saw the Spurs were rumored at one point with Brooklyn to maybe do a trade. Maybe there's a free agent market that acquisition that you look at, but I don't think it needs to be like a huge splash. Just somebody that can come in for a few moments and help get in the way and alter some shots.
Yeah, and I mean, you may play Ben Simmons at that hybrid 5
That's
anyway in a
fair. Yeah.
way, so I do think there's a little bit of optionality there. But I'm kinda with you because I think I mean, one of the big keys for Brooklyn's turnaround too has just been, like, they did a pretty good job on the wings. I mean, TJ
Yep.
Warren, being alive and healthy and playing
Yeah.
basketball, looking a lot more like he did in the bubble than he has recently, I think has been a huge help. Royce O'Neal is somebody that you knew you could count on, was a good solid veteran pickup when they went and got them. So maybe that's not much of a surprise. But with Utah's development as well, I think that's been a pleasant surprise there. It's given them depth. I'm kind of with you. In reference to that Spurs trade, if they could go out and get Jakob Poeltl, I think that would be a really good
Hmm.
pickup. Some sort of player like that. I mean, somebody obviously a little more defensive minded. The defense has certainly gone up and improved since Jacques Vaughn has come in and taken over for Steve Nash. I think that's been another huge reason for their turnaround as well. But yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I don't think they need any forward help. I wouldn't go guards necessarily. It does feel like, again, if you're going to get somebody, to back up Nick Claxton, that feels like the way to go.
Yeah, and then, like I said, after that, just stay out of the news. Don't do anything to
And that's
distract.
and that's easy. I mean, I think if they're winning, they're
It
not
stays away.
going to. I
Yeah.
mean, as long as at least in this streak, like, that's what's been refreshing about Brooklyn finally is that we're talking about them playing basketball. I mean,
Yep.
this looks like the duo, the destructive duo with Kyrie and KD that we thought they could be and that we got a taste of a little bit. Like we did a couple years ago in the playoffs and I mean even when they had Harden, I mean, we saw what they could be until just injuries kicked in. I
Yeah.
mean, I guess that's the other always looming thing is that you just got to keep Kyrie Irving healthy. Like that is truly matters for how far Brooklyn can go is Kyrie Irving's health. Like we saw it derail them a couple years ago. That's obviously a little more out of your hands, so I don't really want to make that a resolution necessarily.
Mhm.
Uh, that Pirtle trade looks really good if they're able to pull that off, and I think Pirtle will obviously be available.
I guess
His age
yeah.
fits a little better,
Well,
so
it just depends on what the asking price potentially is, I think is a big part of it too.
yeah, no,
So
absolutely.
do you want to do your first team or you want me to roll out my 3 and then you do
No,
3?
let's do your three because you're in
Okay.
the East and I'm in the West, so we can just kind of hop back
Yeah.
and forth a little bit.
Okay, so my next one, you want me to go Orlando Magic or Knicks?
I'll just stay in New York then. Go Knicks.
Okay, let's stay in New York. My Knicks one, which was interesting, I found an article that was talking about Knicks and their resolutions for last year. And the resolution for last year was to be more efficient on offense. Um, so I went and looked up to see if that happened, and they're still not that efficient on offense. 24th in the league for field goal percentage, field goal percentage. 23 for 23rd in the league for 3-point percentage and bottom half in the league for field goal while being top 5 in the league for field goal attempts. So I think it can kind of still be the same thing that it was last year for the resolution and get more efficient. Um, that being said, like defensively, the Knicks are really good. Like I've been seeing a lot of looking at a lot of their stats. So like other than being more efficient on offense, I think you could say figure out a way to win at home, and they've been doing a little better job at that, but they weren't for a while. Um, so I think that would be my next thing. But for the Knicks, I just think a little more efficient on the offensive side. You're already, at number 6, essentially one game back from the 76ers and you're on another win streak. You had a win streak going into the Christmas games, essentially. You're on another one now. So like continue to surge, get a little more efficient on offense, and I think good things happen.
Yeah, the Knicks are a little like they're just such a bizarre team to me, but it's been working clearly.
Yeah.
If I were to have anything that would jump out as to close games,
Yeah.
I think there are a couple late where their just offense hasn't
Well,
worked.
and that's
Though
what
I
I'm
think
saying, like, to that efficiency, it kind of plays into that a little bit.
And I think though we're already starting to see a little more like signs on that front. Their win
Mhm.
against Toronto the other night was really good to close one out. I mean, Julius Randle said so as much post game. I think he like his exact quote was, "It's about time we got one of these."
Yeah.
And I mean, Randall's been a big part of why they've turned it around, right? Is like he looks like an all-star. Like he's got 28 points and 11 rebounds in the month of December. Like when the Knicks were the 4 seed a couple years ago, he was the way of that. And then he just kind of fell off last year and regressed more to the mean. If he's going to play like all-star Julius Randle, obviously the ceiling for this team is a lot higher. Because they have plenty of good players on it. I mean, JB again, I'll say this, man. The Jalen Brunson contract talk has got a real quiet recently. He's had probably his best stretch really these last few weeks since coming over, but he's been solid the whole year.
Yeah.
I think he's definitely provided a lot of stability for sure. I mean, you talk about that efficiency. Like, I think Jalen Brunson has run the offense largely to a good degree. I think Mitchell Robinson with a really tough start to the year is starting to round into form a little bit. RJ Barrett has been that way as well. He's started to come on a little bit here as well. Um, and I mean, yeah, look, I think for the Knicks, you got to be pretty happy. I mean, where you are in the standings right now. I mean, you're what are they sixth, I believe, as of
6.
recording this. They're right behind the
Yeah.
Sixers, but they're at a play-in game position. I think if you went into the season and you said realistically, what were was your best case scenario? It's probably pretty close to where they are right now. 1-4 straight as of recording this podcast. So, um, again, yeah, as long as the Knicks remain a competent franchise, they're just going to be in the market with every free agent ever. That's
Yep.
always my other greater point with the Knicks is like, this is what can draw people in. Um, and they didn't just mortgage their future. That's the biggest thing is like, and again, we're going to talk about the Donovan Mitchell trade later. And kind of because we're gonna hit Utah and Cleveland both later on, spoiler alert. But um with the Knicks, you worried if they made that trade that they just wouldn't have enough to be good. We're here now, you have all this optionality still. I think if you wanted to move Randall, he's certainly a lot more movable now. That contract doesn't look nearly as bad. But if he's giving you this level of play, I don't know. I think you got to be pretty enthused with it. I don't know how far they're going to go in the East, but this is for sure an entertaining basketball team right now.
I agree. And that's the fun part of it for the Knicks is they've been entertaining and they're winning good games and it's fun. That's kind of part of my resolution for the Magic, right? Um, it's shedding the development tag because I feel like now with the players and you've started to see some of these guys playing at a better quality of basketball, I guess, that if you start turning those into wins, you shed that development tag. I think the Orlando Magic, they're only 4 games out from being in a potential play-in scenario, and I think that would be a great goal for the Orlando Magic to have because one, we haven't seen the full roster healthy yet play together. Between injuries and random fights on the court and getting suspensions and stuff like that. But that's what I would kind of focus on is trying to get those wins to shed that development tag because I think we're ready now with a few of the guys that we are on Orlando that we're ready to turn that corner. Um, I also saw that they are 24th in the league for opponents' points off turnovers, so maybe just limit that a little bit more. But I think that happens with a young team that's trying to figure it out. So I think it all kind of encompasses the same sort of thing.
Well, yeah, and just having credible guard play will help, which I think they've started to have here the last couple of weeks. It's getting Markel Fultz back. It's getting Jalen Suggs healthy in the lineup for the first time, it feels like this season consistently. Like that's the thing that that's the development that matters here. It's Cole Anthony coming back.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you're absolutely right in terms of what they should be trying to win games now. Like the core looks in place. They needed their superstar, and it looks like they got that in Paolo Banchero. You love the surrounding core. Franz Wagner's been great all year. Ball's development has been one of the success stories of the year. I mean, look at he came over from Denver for nothing basically in that Aaron
And
Gordon trade. He was a toss in.
and not to put it, I mean, I don't even know where it is because I don't think anybody really knows where it is, but like the recent rumors out of Magic practice is that Jonathan Isaac was a full go.
Oh no, they're saying he might be ready. Like
So like,
not
yeah,
back
that's what I
yet, but
mean.
yeah, Jonathan Isaac. I mean, listen, you know how high I was on Jonathan Isaac. I think when he's healthy, he can defend all five positions. I think his offense was really starting to round into four. Like I thought Jonathan Isaac had that superstar
Yeah.
potential maybe even before they had it a couple of years ago. It's just been so many stop and starts. And I mean, realistically, because even when he came back in the bubble, he didn't really play like that. So we're talking going really on about 3 years almost where we haven't seen healthy Jonathan Isaac play basketball. You're at a point now where I think most people in the organization view Jonathan Isaac as house money. So if he's able to come back and contribute and be remotely the guy that he was before, yeah, all of a sudden, I think you're a lot past winning games at that point. At that point, you're like, no, make the play in. Like, absolutely. If you can add a player of that caliber at his health and he grounds back into form, and you have
Yeah.
half the season to do it. Like, they're 4 behind Atlanta and Chicago right now. They're 4 back. They're 2 behind Toronto. They're 2.5 behind Washington. I mean, if you look at the way some of those teams are trending and what could happen, like I think them getting into the play in may be a little bit of a stretch.
If you well, not even that, you give me Paulo, Bol, Wagner, Fultz, Suggs, Isaac, Cole Anthony, just just to
Wendell
name a few.
Carter.
That's what I mean. Like that to me, like, and that's just by the way, literally, I just typed in Magic roster and just listed what they had like on the page. That to me is an, in my opinion, a roster that should be playing for a potential playoff spot.
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I
Like a
think that's
lower tier
definitely what
playing
it is.
spot, but for
Yeah,
sure, like they're winning games at that point. It's not
right,
just like, hey, I mean, you are trying to develop habits. Like these guys are very young, and I think
right.
you have to give them that little bit of a benefit there. But a couple of these guys aren't like they've got some seasons now. Like Franz is in year 2, Cole's in year 3. It's going to come along here a little bit, even if they're younger.
I agree. And you look at the teams that are down there with them. Um, with surprisingly the Raptors, I feel like they've always kind of been a staple of like consistency the last few years. So
Dude, the
seeing
Raptors
them,
stink this year, and I don't know
I
what. And
know
like they're playing hard a couple of games, but they just it. There's no life there. There's no defensive
something's up.
intensity the way there used to be. I mean, I didn't have them on the resolutions, but like they're kind of weirdly trending blow up territory right now, with the exception of Siakam. Siakam's been phenomenal. Like none of that applies to Pascal Siakam.
Yeah, but
But
if you move a few things around Siakam, maybe you can add that because they are 3-7 in their last 10. Like it's not looking good. But then and the Wizards, like the Wizards are the Wizards. The Hawks have a weird situation where their coach might be talking about not wanting to play anymore. That was wild. And then you're at the 9th seed with the Bulls. So like to me, the Magic with the roster they have, as long as it can be healthy and they can play together and they can get out of their own way from like the young developing side of things because you're going to have mistakes made when you're that young of a team and you're doing your thing, but like you should be able to start making a push towards that playoff uh spot. Now I understand some people might not want that because of the draft this year, but I think the Magic are ready to go
they're
for it.
too high up anyway. Like that's the thing, and
Yeah.
you kind of knew that going into it. Is like they're not bad. I mean, they're still going to get a higher pick most likely, but yeah, I don't think they're going to be bad enough to be unless they just are favored by the lottery gods. But I have a
Yeah.
hard time seeing them bad enough as a couple teams will be for the rest of the year. I mean, and again, they're
Rockets.
a team that's trending upwards. Like I think there are teams that are going to trend downwards post trade deadline and markets and with injuries and things like that. The Magic, I'm with you, are kind of a team that I think is going to trend upwards. All
Yeah.
right, so I'm going to switch conferences now. I want to go west a little bit, and some of these teams we're going to talk about injury wise. So these are kind of the ones we aren't going to talk about as much injury
Sure.
wise. So first up, I've got Dallas. And for Dallas, they're at 4 right now in the West. They're 22 and 17. They lost one, but they had won, I believe, 5 in a row before that. Starting to finally put it together. Beat a bunch of bad teams, but like I'm never going to fault the schedule for that. Like,
Sure.
and if
Sure.
anything, I credit them for taking care of their business. My resolution for them is to just I let Christian Wood keep him in the starting lineup. Like it's been working with Luka. I know there were, kind of usage concerns and defensive concerns about how sustainable that was. But I think he's bought in a little bit more, Christian Wood, that is, on that end as well. Um, and I mean, just their numbers are better. Like with Doncic and Wood on the court, the Mavericks are a plus 12.8 per 100 possessions. The offense in particular has really turned on. I think since adding him into the starting lineup, it's really been a boost for them. I know they were trying to bring him off the bench early on. Jason Kidd talked about that, but I think, again, the offense certainly has looked a lot better from how mediocre it started at the beginning of the season. And I think that gives you a lot more hope going into the playoffs if you're able to sustain that a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. You look at Dallas and their kind of positioning in the league, and nothing like screams success, if that makes sense. Like you look at their points per game, like you were alluding to, they're 20th in the league, and this is the full season. Rebounds per game, 30th in the league, assists per game, 29th in the league, opponents, points per game, 5th. So like that's good, but nothing screams like, you know, elite part of the league. They're kind of at the lower end on most of those things. So it's kind of surprising. Obviously a lot of it is run through Luca. So if something happens in Luca's scenario, this benefits his MVP case. Is like things aren't going to look good in Dallas, you know?
Yeah, no, 100%. My next one is the Clippers, who are the losers of 5 straight going into this. Um, and that's kind of where I just feel like they need to get some consistency and up the energy level.
Yeah.
You hate to bring it to that, but the offense has looked out of sync. Kawhi Leonard, after they got smoked by Denver the other night. And Kawhi said they got to play harder, they got to play smarter. There's just too much hero basketball going on. And look, like I know there's been a lot of injuries too.
Well, he said that, and then
Um,
he sat out the next game with a knee.
yeah.
So
Um, yeah, but I mean, if you look at where they are right now, again, they're 7th in the standings, they're 21 and 20. This is a team we keep talking about winning the finals. Um, I don't know. Like it again, we're in January now, but we're starting to get about halfway through the season. They for sure had, and this is via Joey Lynn on Twitter, the Clippers have had the easiest schedule by a significant margin to start the season. Like, and you're treading around 500 right now. Like, you're not really
mhm.
going to get much of a break there. If I had another one, it would be just the rebounding has got to get better. Specifically in games recently, you saw Jokic eat him up the other night. Bam had a really nice game against them the other night. Um, Even late, it just bogged down. Like the Sixers' best win of the season to me came against the Clippers, putting the hometown hat on. And that's a game where they really just out offense them in the fourth quarter without Tyrese Maxey. So,
And that would kinda
um,
be that's kinda my thing is, like, you look at their opponents' points per game, they're 4th in the league, which is really good, but then their offense, their points per game is 29th in the league,
yeah, like,
which they're at 109, to their opponents being held to 110. It's like, man, you just get a little bit more point production, like, you're in the positive there, and that swings a few games potentially your way. So, like, it's surprisingly the offense. I feel like we never really on a team where you've got Paul George and Kawhi, and then I know John Wall was out last year, and we didn't know what fully to expect from John Wall, but, like, those 3 names on a team, like, you wouldn't think offensive problems as much.
no, definitely not. I mean, that's kind of the point is where it's like, how are you 29th in offense when you got Paul George and Kawhi Leonard on your team? Like, I know Kawhi has missed time,
And, yeah,
but
they've missed time, and I get that, but still, like, come
it's
on.
not great. And my last New Year's resolution is for Utah. Um, and for Utah, it's just to get to do better in the clutch. Like they just have really been average there down the stretch this year. And I mean the ultimate where I feel like it just kind of rubbed it in, right? Is the other night where against the Kings, where De'Aaron Fox had that layup, and then Lauri Markkanen just hits this like prayer three, falling, like kind of going out of bounds. Looks like it's going to give them the win, and of course, it's just a second too late. They end up losing the game by 1 point. Um, they've been struggling a little bit recently. Again, it's tough because the Jazz are in a weird spot, right? Like no one expected them remotely to be here. We thought they were going to be one of the worst teams in the league, tanking for Wembanyama. Instead, they're right here, 20-21 in the 10th spot in the Western Conference. They are a game behind being out of the play-in entirely. They're 2 games back from 5th and 3 games back from 4th for some perspective of how close this is. At the same token, they're 3-7 in their last 10. Blew a 12-point lead to the Warriors the other night. Again, that loss to Sacramento, pretty heartbreaking. But I think with Utah, it's besides getting better in the clutch too, it's just making a hard decision on what your identity is. Like with Markkanen, clearly he's a guy going forward. Like he has proven that without a doubt. He is
Sure. Yeah.
undeniably your success story of the season. A guy like Colin Sexton is still somebody that you're putting a lot of time into. But, when you look at the Mike Conleys and the Jordan Clarksons, the Bogdanoviches, the Kelly Olynyk's, like these are the guys where you do wonder, like it was always the question is, are they going to move come trade deadline time, which of course would lower the ceiling of this team significantly. But I think Utah, the good thing is they have the flexibility a little bit, having all those picks post Mitchell and Gobert trade. You don't have to be, necessarily super firm on it, but I think there's a good situation given how they played this year to maximize that. And as fun as of a story as Utah's been, I still think they kind of should be in maximize mode here.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because you look at, again, just from their standings within the league, it's almost the opposite problem from the Clippers. Their offense, they're third in the league for offense production, but then their opponents per game is 22nd in the league. Like they're just surprisingly with the Utah team that we're used to seeing, decent on defense, and a lot of that goes to the credit of Rudy Gobert. Um, they haven't found that fix. And again, once they do that, things start going in their direction. And I think um, you use this season because I don't believe that there was many expectations, right? On the season, although I think once they came out and started winning, expectations started to set in a little bit.
Did they
But
though?
I think we always knew it was going to come back down to earth a little bit. Um, but I still think because there weren't expectations to begin with,
Yeah.
you kind of have that luxury to figure out who and what and where you're going with this team. But the fact that they're doing it with a team that's like decent is
No.
is like, okay, this can turn around a lot faster than maybe we thought it would have.
Well, and the Jazz smoked those trades. Like, there's no way
Yeah.
about the Gobert trade from the Utah perspective was an instant W. Like, there's no way around it. Like, no matter what you thought of Rudy Gobert, you essentially got 4 first rounders and 5, if you count Walker Kessler, is via more or less a first rounder since they had just got him the year before Minnesota drafted him. And then with Donovan Mitchell, like, I know. And we talked a little bit before we started because, we're going to get into Donovan Mitchell's 71-point game now. But, I think you asked me if you felt or if I thought there was any almost like seller's remorse with Donovan Mitchell where he missed it. And I think in that situation, like, yeah, I think it's bittersweet because Donovan Mitchell had a great relationship with the Utah fans. Like, I think everyone in Utah wanted Donovan Mitchell to be successful. I think he wanted to be successful there, and they were for a while. And so in a sense that it didn't end the way that I think most people thought it would, definitely, because Donovan Mitchell is having a phenomenal season with the Cavaliers. He's been everything as advertised and more than they needed, all
Well,
that
it's
they
like
needed and more.
to
And I
me,
think with the Utah thing, it's also tough because it is more hypothetical. But having gotten all those picks and Markkanen, who's been an instant success, and Colin Sexton, I still think you feel pretty good about it if you're Utah.
it's quite literally you broke up with your ex, you now see your ex with a really hot significant other and they're super happy, and you're like, "Wow, man, that was us." But then you also know that you're talking to somebody that it's probably gonna lead to a relationship and you're also really happy. So, like,
Yeah.
win-win.
Life is good. It's kind of, I mean, we're going to talk Kings a little bit later too. more on the injury front, unfortunately, but, like, that's the other trade that's just been such a big win-win recently is, like, and I understand that Halliburton is going crazy in Indy, and he looks really good long term, but, like, let's not act like freeing up that backcourt hasn't opened De'Aaron Fox up big time and allowed him to
Right.
expand his offensive game, and the fact Sabonis is really good in his own right and has helped elevate that team as well. Um, but yeah, Donovan Mitchell's 71-point game, man. I mean, you want to talk about I know, and I know it went to overtime, but that is maybe the second best game I've ever seen, only behind Kobe's 81 in the regular
Yeah.
season. Because the assists were there too. He had what? He had 9 assists that game. So figure you factor in he scored 71, and then he directly assisted to at the minimum another 18. I think it was the first time since Wilt's 100 game that somebody basically accounted for 90 plus points. Um, Given the gravity and the clutch situation of those shots, all the 3-pointers he had in overtime, again, the missed free throw
Oh my goodness.
put back. Yeah, I'm really like that was an absolute masterclass. It is by far, in my opinion, even better than the 60-pointer in the bubble. I think it's the best
Well,
game of Donovan Mitchell's career. I think it's one of the best regular season performances that we will ever see.
and I remember, I forget what was going on, but I wasn't watching the game. Um, I
No,
was
it was
doing
because DeMar Hamlin got hurt that night, so that's
that's
what
what I was
stunk, is
watching,
that
right.
everyone
And
was sad because DeMar and shout out prayers up for DeMar Hamlin. Shout out to him doing better already. Like, what an absolute best case scenario given how that played out. Like, that
so
is such
crazy.
a great turnaround that he's gonna be all right. And, dealing with the cardiac injury in the Bills-Bengals game, like, what a nightmare, scary situation, and quite literally basically the best case scenario after that happened that he's
When
going
I
to be back and all
remember
right now. But it for sure overshadowed that a little bit because everyone was
right.
like making sure that, you know, this guy wasn't going to die. And then meanwhile, Donovan Mitchell's out in Cleveland having the game of his life.
Well, and I remember 'cause, we were watching the football game and that was going on. So obviously when something big happens on in a game, like people are going to Twitter to talk about it. It's just like where that's where it happens. So like I was like, "Oh, I got to get on Twitter and see what everybody's saying and see if I can get some updates." And I go on there and the first tweet I see is from our boy Keith and he goes, "It's wild that we are in the fourth quarter and Donovan Mitchell is running around these guys like everyone else is so exhausted and he's not." And I'm like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
wonder what he's doing too." And obviously got distracted because I was more focused on the injury. And then I looked up and I'm like, "Oh, damn, he put up 71 points. Like, holy cow, dude." And like you said, not only 71 points, 11 assists, 8 rebounds. It was phenomenal. Um, and it's not the only big game that we kind of missed since we last podcast. We alluded to it. Luca had a 60-point, 20 rebound, triple double, which was the first in history. I'm pretty sure.
No, it's him and Harden. Harden
Him
did
and
it too with
Harden. Okay,
Houston.
yeah. So that in general is wild. It was obviously, or not obviously, it was against the Knicks, so which is kind of funny because we were just talking about how great the Knicks were doing. And was it on the day they revealed Dirk's statue or what? I knew it was close.
It was close. That Dirk statue is so great, by the way. They did such a good job on that.
I am sad that they didn't do the original rendering where it was like the ball was on it multiple times, so it was supposed to look
Oh
like the
yeah,
shot.
yeah. No, that was a little weird. Yeah,
Looked
I'm
like,
glad they
hey,
got rid of that.
listen, cover your kids' ears. It looked like butt plugs. I'm just gonna
No,
put
that's what I'm
it out
saying, bro. That's what I'm saying. It was a little weird. I just not what they were probably going for.
It seriously
um,
was wild. But yeah, so the official stat was 21 rebounds, which was obviously a career high for Luca. The 10 assists was his 52nd triple double of his career, and he again, like we talked about with Donovan, scored or assisted on 16 of the 23 points that Dallas scored in the fourth quarter and in overtime in that game to get that win. So both were phenomenal. And not to just graze over that, but another one that happened, which I thought was worth celebrating, was Clay dropping that 54 in the double overtime win against Atlanta because we hadn't seen that from Clay since the injury. So, like, it's good to see him rounding back out as well.
yeah, especially when it felt like the first chunk of the season was talking about how he was washed and how there was
Right.
this and it was that. That was definitely a great win for Clay for sure. You talk about guys that they need to step up when Steph is out. There's a great example and clearly him doing that.
Yeah.
With the Donovan Mitchell 71er, I want to go back. So the 70-point club, Wilt and Booker both scored 70 in a game. Wilt did in 1963, Book did in 2017, and that was in that loss, if you remember that. That was crazy. Um, Donovan Mitchell with 71. David Robinson scored 71 in 94 for the Spurs. I believe that was when he needed that to clinch the scoring title, which was incredible. And then Elgin Baylor also scored 71 in 1960. Wilt had 72 in 1962. Wilt also had 73 twice in 1962. David Thompson had 73 in 1978. Then Wilt had 78 in 1961. Kobe had 81 in 06, and Wilt had 100 in 1962. Yeah, Wilt is just ridiculous, man. This the top 20 is just all it's more like it's all Wilt. The only other people that aren't Wilt in the top 20 for NBA game scores are MJ, Booker, Elgin Baylor, David Robinson, David Thompson, and Kobe. Like that, and most of them don't even have 60. Like, or most of them, I should say, are in 60s. Like Book, Elgin Baylor, David Robinson, Donovan Mitchell, and Kobe and David Thompson are the only non-Wilt players to ever score 70 in an NBA game.
That's wild.
Yeah, and I mean, Books was in 2017.
17. I remember that one.
And Kobe's before that. I mean, Kobe was 06. Before that,
was his like his last game? How many did he score in that last game? It was
no,
against
Kobe
Utah.
scored 60 in his last game,
60,
but it wasn't.
okay.
No, that was against Toronto.
I couldn't remember.
He had 81 against Toronto in 06, which was crazy because I think he had
81,
like 20 something at half. It was the second half where it's just so ridiculous. But I mean, before that, it's back to David Robinson. David Robinson in 94. Then we're going back to the set. David Thompson's was in 78, and then you're pretty much back in the 60s for the rest of them.
Yeah, that's wild, man. It's crazy, and it's such a cool. I mean, it's so cool to see a player go off like that in general.
It's just you just got to give it up. It's sometimes you just got to give it up. That's one of those games. Like he just was in his zone. Like he that night. He knew he was going off. Like, and sometimes you just got to feed him. Like, that's the offense. Like, you just give it to him and let him go.
Let him happen.
Until he misses. And like I said, they needed every one of those points to beat Chicago. That Luka, I didn't want to sleep on that Luka stat line though either. That is absolutely, like we said, the fact that that's only happened twice in NBA history. Harden won I'm pretty sure that was the Harden MVP year when he was, but either way, that was in Houston where he was at the prime of his career, putting up video game numbers.
Yeah.
Just absolutely ridiculous. Like we said, they've been going through the offense. Everybody knows it's coming with Luka, and it doesn't matter. But the facilitating too is super impressive. Thank you everybody for listening to this episode of Driving Dish NBA Podcast. Appreciate you guys as always. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. Read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, Amazon Music, anywhere you find a podcast, you can find us.
Yep, and we are on YouTube, so if you would like to watch a video version of the podcast, you can always do so. Just search Driving Dish NBA. It's just another way to watch or listen if you prefer that form of entertainment. You can find us there, Driving Dish NBA Podcast on YouTube.